Today's daf we're going to be learning is Avodah Zarah daf kafchet. Brace yourselves for an interesting daf. We're going to get the beginning of our daf is going to be a continuation of our sugya about are you allowed to get medical advice, treatment, all those things from an idol worshiper. From there, we're going to immediately move off, as we started yesterday, into the issue of Chilul Shabbat and what can you desecrate Shabbat for, which I mentioned yesterday as the topic of daf Mishalahem for this week. And from there, we're going to get off on a whole tangent into all sorts of remedies. And we're going to have a daf, a whole amud worth of, first of all, completely complicated words that you're not used to seeing in general. And we'll just have to go through all these remedies, which, if you recall, we've learned before that whenever there's remedies in the Gemara, first of all, we like to say two things about them. One is that the rabbis clearly saw themselves, and you're going to see that very much today, as the bearers of all information. Okay, not only halachic information, but also how to cure yourself from various ailments. That's number one. Number two, it's that, we say we do not follow any of the remedies. In fact, a bunch of the commentaries say, this is not what we do. Do not take any advice from the Gemara. That was in a particular time. Those were things they thought were remedies, but do not follow the Gemara for medical advice. So I will give that as a warning before we get into all these crazy suggestions they're going to make. Okay, and hopefully we'll understand them. Some of them are a little hard to understand. We're going to get started with just a quick review. We saw two main things once we started this Mishnah. What are you allowed or not allowed to do? According to Rav Yehuda, you can't go to an idol worshiper for anything, even you have a small wound from the bloodletting, like a little injury, nothing. Okay, then we had Rabbi Yochanan who said, okay, first of all, we talked about Rofe Mumche, perhaps then, because the whole concern is they're going to there's concern they might kill you and no one will ever know. So we saw number one, if they're a mumche and they have a reputation on the line, or if they're getting paid, if they kill you, they won't get paid. So there were certain, exceptions to the rule. Then Rabbi Yochanan said at the top of the daf that if you're on anyway going to die, and this is the only way you could get helped is through this idol worshiper, we'll go for it, because what's the worst? They'll kill you a few hours before. Who cares, right? Then we said maybe we do care, and then we had this whole discussion, and we ended with this crazy story, which we're going to come back to him with this Yaakov Ish Farsachnia, who was a student of Jesus of Nazareth, and there was this whole story where they wouldn't allow him to get healed by him. But then we said that's because he's a heretic. And even though the person was going to die anyway, and this was their last chance, still they weren't allowed to, because a heretic, we make a distinction, heretic and idol worshiper. Because again, idol worshiper, the concern is they're going to kill you. Heretic, there's a concern they're going to pull you over to the other side. And that is worse. So that, therefore, no, not at all, because that even before death would be an issue, right? They would pull you over at the end of your life to become a heretic, that would be terrible. Okay, so those were a few of the concepts that came up. Some of them will repeat themselves today, others will be new. So now we're going to start with the bottom of Kafsayin and Mabet, which we started yesterday, but we'll start again. We're going to have two statements in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and what we said here is that it's clear Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rav Yehuda. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan at the top of the Amud, when he said, if you're anyway going to die, that seemed to be even within Rav Yehuda. But now we're going to see he seems to disagree, because Rav Yehuda said nothing at all. And Rabbi Yochanan says, according to the first version of what Rabbi Yochanan said, Kol makasha mechalalim alei Shabbat ein mitrapim mehem. When can you not get healed from them? If it's something that's your life is potentially in danger. Because anything, again, it would have to be your life is potentially in danger, but you're not about to die immediately, because if you were going to die immediately and this is your last chance, he already said it's okay. But if you're not going to die immediately, but there's a chance this could lead to your death, this disease you have, not sure, but it's suffix, that is something you're allowed to desecrate Shabbat for, and that is something that you are not allowed to get an idol worshiper to help you with. Why? Because if it's something that could lead to death, then again, they could kill you and claim, oh, it was just the disease. But lighter things, like the Rivda de Kusilta that Rav Yehuda was talking about, that would be permitted. Some people say, it's not whether or not you can be Mechalal Shabbat, it's whether or not it's internal. Okay, there's a big debate what exactly internal means. Like, is it internal organs and not limbs? Is it anything inside? Okay, which would include your limbs. Anyway, inside. Okay, make some distinction inside. We're going to see that that's also a condition for Shabbat as well. We'll get back to that. So if it's an internal, then ailment. My benai, what's the difference between these two? What's the practical ramification of these two opinions? It's not exactly clear what they're talking about here, but if you have some sort of wound on your hand or on your foot, then we'll see this is a ramification of the two. Why? Okay, Rav Admar is in the name of Rav. Now we're switching topics. We're moving to Shabbat. We're going to see them keep switching back and forth. But we're using this halachi said about Shabbat to explain what would be a ramification between the two versions of what Rabbi Yochanan said. Now we're going to see that this makasha halal and mechalim Shabbat go together. But what they're saying is there's certain things that are treated like as if they're internal wounds, even though they're not. If you have a wound on your palm of your hand or your foot, then there is, if they're internal wounds, and you can desecrate Shabbat for them. So now, what do we say? If you say it's the issue is mechalim Shabbat, then if you have a problem in your gav yad, gav regel, well, then you can't go to an idol worshiper because that's in the category of mechalim Shabbat. And I'm sorry, mechalim Shabbat, which would then say you can't go to an idol worshiper doctor. But if you say only on internal things, this isn't actually internal. So even though for Shabbat, you would say it's like internal wounds and you can desecrate Shabbat. But if you say the whole criteria for idol worshiper doctor is it internal or external? Well, this is definitely external, and therefore, even though it's treated like a makasha halal for Shabbat, it's still not internal, and then you would actually be able to be allowed to go to an idol worshiper doctor. Now we're going to start with some issues having to do with chilul Shabbat, okay, with desecrating Shabbat. Amar Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia Amar Rav, Kol makasha tzricha omed mechalalin alei Shabbat. So Rav is quoted as saying, anything that you need to assess, that needs assessment, meaning it's possible. What's an assessment? An assessment, is this disease going to kill the person or not kill the person? If you're already in a stage where you feel like there needs to be an assessment made, meaning it could be that you might die from it, then you can desecrate Shabbat. Amar Rav Shemin bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'hai ishata tzmirta kemakasha halal. This is a high fever. Fever, we're going to see, is called in different words, but one of them is ishata, from ish, fire, like a fever, fire burning inside you. So this type of fever, called the tzmirta, is like an internal wound, and mechalin alei Shabbat. Okay, even though it's not a wound like an internal wound, but it's like it because it's a fever burning in your body. Mehechan makashal halal. Now, if we're talking about this makashal halal, that you can be b'chalal Shabbat, from where do we define internal? Now, internal we can understand in many places, but in the mouth is open, and what's considered inside, what's considered outside. To which they say very simply, perish Rabbi Ami min hasafa v'lifnim. From the lips and inward, that's all considered internal. By Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar asks, Kachi v'shinei mai. Okay, your teeth and your gums, what about those? No. Aren't they inside the lips? So why would you think not? Well, since they're hard, maybe they're considered like an external. Okay, maybe because they're hard and strong. Okay, because they're strong, maybe we consider them external and they're not so dangerous. Or maybe because physically they're actually inside the lips. They're considered like an internal. So we're going to have two attempts to try to prove this. Both are going to fail. And the second one's going to be quite an interesting story that's going to get us off on a bit of a tangent. Amrabai, Tashma, HaChoshesh b'shinav lo yigama behem chometz. If you have, choshesh, we're going to assume choshesh b'shinav means you have a concern that something might be developing into a pain in your teeth. Well, you can't gargle with vinegar on Shabbat because, again, that's a remedy. It's like a medicine. You're not supposed to use medicine on Shabbat. Again, depending on the situation, that's the whole thing here. And this is only a concern for a pain, and therefore you can't, which is what the Gemara infers from here. It sounds like if it's only a concern that it might lead to serious pain, but it's not yet. But if you really have pain, it sounds like you'd be able to use this remedy, which means you can use medicine on Shabbat. Dilma, they say no. Maybe maybe real pain is also called choshesh. The word choshesh is we're concerned for, but concerned for could mean you already have pain, and therefore it's not clear. Maybe this means you can't, which means it's considered external to the body. So we don't know. Tashma, second source. Rabbi Yochanan, okay, remember Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, now we're talking, I want to just be clear here because we've been switching back between idol worshiper and Shabbat, and this story brings both together. But why we're really bringing this story right now is to figure out what's considered internal for Shabbat. Okay, when it comes to Shabbat, you can be Mechalel Shabbat if it's internal. So now we have a story with Rabbi Yochanan, and we want to know what's the story with teeth. So Chash b'tzafdina, he had this tooth disease called safdina. He goes to a matron, which is usually a Roman noblewoman, who here in this case was giving him a remedy. So we're going to get back to the idol worshiping issue. So she gave him medicine for Thursday and Friday. Amarla lemachal mai. He says, what if the next day I have a problem and it's Shabbat and I can't come back to you because it's Shabbat? Right? It's like you go to the drugstore and they give you only for the next 2 days, and you say, but you're leaving me in the dark on Shabbat. I need more medicine because if something happens on Shabbat, I won't be able to come back to the pharmacy. I need a solution. Amarle lo tzricha. She says, listen, you're not going to need it on Shabbat. But Rabbi Yochanan doesn't really accept that, and he's still a little bit worried. Eat tzrich namai. Well, what if I really do need it? Then what am I going to do? Now, she didn't want to give him more medicine, I'm assuming, because she didn't want to, create more medicine. So what'd she say? Amra ishtabali de lo magale. She said, listen, if you swear to me you won't reveal the secret to anybody, I will tell you how I prepared this medicine. Ishtabala lelaha Yisrael lo magalina. So he swears to her the following words. He says, to the God of Israel, I will not reveal. Galyale. So she told him, Lemachar, nafik darsha b'pirka. The next day, he goes and he teaches it in the yeshiva. Okay, and he teaches everybody. This is where I said before in the beginning of class, the rabbis saw themselves as responsible for giving people all sorts of remedies as well, not just teaching Torah. So instead of giving his regular shiur, or maybe before or after, we don't know, but he got up in public and he told everybody how to do the remedy after he had sworn to her that he wouldn't tell anybody. Very strange story. So the Gemara says, but he took an oath. To which they answer, no, notice the wording of his oath. He said, he said, I won't reveal it to the God of Israel. But to the nation of Israel, I can't reveal. So the Gemara still doesn't like that. This is mamash chilul Hashem, right? To dupe her into thinking that he was taking the oath and he wasn't going to tell anybody, and then he told. Seems like a major problem of chilul Hashem. Well, digale lami ikara. He told her in advance. Now, from the beginning. What does it mean from the beginning? Well, obviously not before she told him. But right after she told him, he said, I want you to notice, I took an oath specifically I wasn't going to tell the God of Israel, but I am going to tell the people. And before he revealed to them, he actually told her that he was going to do that. How that resolves the problem, I'm not exactly sure. It doesn't fully solve the problem because, maybe he saw her reaction and maybe she was okay with it, although it's a little weird to be okay with it after she made him take the oath. Anyway, it's a bit of a strange story. Anyway, the point of bringing this story was to show that he was willing to use a remedy on Shabbat, which means teeth must be a makah of internal. Okay, we're going to have to get back to the fact that, what did we say before? If you can be Mechalel Shabbat, then he said, or a makah shel halal, you can't go to an idol worshiper for a remedy. So how did he go to her? It's a separate problem, but it's not why we brought it. So let's stick with why we brought it, and then we'll get back to it. So we brought this to prove that a tooth is considered internal, and therefore you can be Mechalel Shabbat, because look at what Rav Yochanan did. Now notice, by the way, we don't know if he made this on Shabbat and used it on Shabbat, but he did at least ask, what will I do on Shabbat? It seemed like he had no problem using it on Shabbat. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. No, you can't learn from here. He says, Shanit Safdina hu il matchil b'peh v'gomer b'bnei ma'ayim. Safdina isn't just a usual toothache. It's a toothache that starts in the tooth. It's a disease that basically starts in the teeth and moves to your innards. Now, diseases in your innards were considered very serious, and of course they're obviously internal. Whether they're serious or not, they're still internal, and therefore you can be Mechalel Shabbat, but this doesn't teach you anything about a regular tooth pain. My simane. Now we want to know, well, how do I know if I'm getting this kind of disease, or how do I know also if this is the disease that I have, so I can know whether I can be Mechalel Shabbat? In any case, we don't really have an answer, and maybe the closer answer is to saying it sounds like right now teeth isn't necessarily internal. Okay, we don't really know though. So now we're going to say, and from the first one, right, it could go either way. So my simane, how do we know if you have this safdina? Rami midi bekache, if you put something between your teeth, umaite dama by your gums, umaite dama dare, and then blood starts coming out of your from the rows of your teeth. Mimai have, what causes this? Because it's also important to know so you can avoid this. Well, mikarire karir dechite, if you eat food made of wheat that's very, very cold, or mechamim desare, or you make foods out of barley that are very, very hot. Mishiure kasa harsana, or from the leftovers, you eat the leftovers of this kasa harsana, which is this kind of fish that comes up in the Gemara a lot. My avdale. Now we want to know, okay, well, what was the remedy if Rabbi Yochanan taught it to everybody? Well, we want to know also. We're going to have a few different opinions about what this remedy was. Amrav achabrei Rava, meseol, you put leavening agent into water, and shemen zayit and pelach, and you mix olive oil and salt. Umar Ashi amar mishcha da'avza begad fada'asi. You take goose fat, mishcha we're going to see a lot here, like shemen hamishcha, right? Mishcha is oil or fat. Here it's the fat of the goose. You put it on goose feathers, and that's your remedy. Rabbi, Ana Avda Kuli Veloitase. I had this problem. I used all these things. Nothing helped me. Ada Amrli Ahutaya. Then I had a nomad was passing by and told me I take Hashiata de Zeta, take a pit of olives, Dilomalu tilta that didn't get to a third of its growth yet. Bekalanu Amara Chadita, roast it on a hot hoe, on a sharp hot hoe, okay, like heat it up, roast it there, v'dabik be didare, and then put it on the teeth. Oh, chadata is new, not sharp. Thank you. On a new hoe, roast it or heat it up on a new hoe, and put it on your teeth, like the salve that you get from that. Avdahachi v'tase, and I used this remedy that this nomad told me, and I was healed. Rabbi Yochanan hechi avdahachi. Now, we go back to the basic question. After we dealt with all this stuff about Safdina, how did Rabbi Yochanan do this? What we started with today. If you can be Mechalel Shabbat for it, which obviously you could. You can't go to an idol worshiper for advice about this. So how did he go to her? First answer, Adam Chashuv Shani. He's a prominent person, just like a Rofe Mumche won't ruin their reputation. Also, if the person they're healing is an important person, they're not going to kill them because people will know and they'll get in trouble. But wait, that can't be because Rabbi Abau is an Adam Chashuv also. And listen to this story. Ramale Yaakov Mina. Remember Yaakov, the min from yesterday, the heretic? So this same Yaakov gave him Sama Ashaki. He gave him a remedy for his thigh, for his calf, okay, for his leg. Ve'ilo Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi delachachu l'shake. If Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi hadn't come along and licked his leg and taken the salve off his leg, paske l'shake, they would have had to amputate his leg. What do you see from here? The mean was trying to kill Rabbi Abau, even though, or at least make him lose his leg, make him amputate his leg, even though Rabbi Abau was an Adam Chashuv. So you see that doesn't make any difference. So maybe you can answer something else then. Forget the answer that Rabbi Yochanan was Adam Chashuv. To Rabbi Yochanan, Rofe Mumchava. Maybe it's because Rabbi Yochanan's doctor, this matronly woman, she was a Rofe Mumche. And that we saw already. If you have a reputation already, then you won't risk it. To Rabbi Abau Nami Rofe Mumchava. So they say, maybe, but Rabbi Abau's, this Yaakov we saw yesterday, they went to him for something, and they went to him today, in today's story, seems like he was also a Rofe Mumche. So now they give a different answer, and this is the same answer we had yesterday. We're going to distinguish heretic and idol worshiper, right? They keep thinking that they're the same and then realize they're different. Shani Rabbi Abau de mukme be mine benafshayu. Tamot nafshi im plishtim. The meaning the heretics say about themselves, Tamut nafshi im plishtim. This is what Shimshon did when he brought down the temple, right? And then he died together with the plishtim. He says, I'm willing to die with the plishtim. So this Yaakov, the heretics are willing to basically bring themselves down, even ruin their reputation, as long as they can bring down the Jews with them. So heretics are in a different category. That's not the same as everybody else. Okay, so you're asking why these doctors didn't die from the salve by licking it. I assume it was because his leg was injured, and then putting that on was not the right thing to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that's a problem for anyone to, come in contact with it. We're going to see that later. That some things that are good for one, right? We all know medicines what might help somebody if you have some other disease that could kill you. We saw that yesterday also. If you ask for advice about a medicine, right, you'll probably ask a second opinion. If someone says that could kill you, don't use it. Amar Shmuel. Okay, now we're going to get off on our big tangent, which is we're going to have a whole list of things, starting from a gash caused by a sword, hypadata, sakantahi, it's dangerous, and mechalalin alat Shabbat. So we're starting with seemingly connected to our sugya. This you can be mechalel Shabbat for if you have a gash from a sword. Umaya suta. But now we're going to start saying, what's your cure? And then we're going to go through a whole list of things that could happen to you and how you cure them. Lemifsak dama, well, if you want to just stop the blood, tachle bechala, take cress and soak it in vinegar and eat that. La suke, if you want to cause it to the flesh to start growing, basically like this, to start scabbing and get healed, right? Once the blood is stopped, garda de yavla, scrapings of yavla, not clear what that is, vigirda dasana, and scrapings of a thorn bush, o nikra mikal kilta, or the salve from worms of the garbage dump. Okay, very pleasant. Amar of Safra, hi invita. If you have these grape-like boils, notice the word invita. It's like anav, grape. So if you have grape-like boils, parvanka de malacha de mutahi. It's the forerunner of the angel of death. Okay, again, super dangerous. What do you do, Maya Sute? How do you heal this? Tinga beduvsha, put the tinga plant in honey, soak it in honey, or carpus abatilia, or put parsley in wine. Adahachi vahachi, while it's soaking, lete invita bat mina, find a grape that's the same size as your grape-like boil. Vinigander ilave, and rub it on it. Chivarte lechivarte ukamte lukamte. And if your boil is white, put a white grape on it. If your boil is dark, put a dark grape on it. Amar Rav, hi simta, if you have an abscess, prabanga de ashatahi. This is the forerunner of a fever. You have an infection. We all know internal infections can be really bad and cause you to get a fever and sick. Maya sute, so what do you do to fix it? Lemachye shitin iskutle, snap it 60 times. Like I think what they mean is snap your finger like while touching it. Velikari shtiva erev, and then cut it horizontally and vertically. V'hanimili de lo chiva reshe, but this is only if it's not white at the tip yet. Aval chiva reshe, if it's white at the tip, late lamba, then it's not anything to worry about because that means it's already healing. Rabbi Yaakov chash bepika, he had hemorrhoids. Okay, turning now to Amabet. Orele Rabbi Ami, v'amrele Rabbi Asi, orele. Okay, one of these rabbis, we're not sure who. Again, what do you see? They went to rabbis for healing purposes. So one of them told him, Lete shev bine ala toalana. Okay, take 7 seeds of an ice plant that are red. Okay, tolana is red because they're red like some sort of worm. Vitzir le b'chalala debeit savra. I think what this means is they would take shirts, they would make a cloth, and then they cut out the neck. So take the piece that you cut out from the neck, like the collar of the shirt, wrap it in that material. So you take these 7 ice plant seeds that are red, wrap them in this cloth that's taken from a shirt. Take a strip of hair. Like most of the commentaries say it's an animal hair. Tie it. And dip it in white neft. Okay, nafta, it's a type of substance. Bilikle, burn it. Ubadole lave. And after you burn it, spread the ashes on the spot. Adahachi bahachi, in the meanwhile, while you're preparing this, lete kashiatad asana, take the kernel of a tree, like a fruit from a tree called an asana. Linach pika lahade pika. Now, all fruits have like an opening. Put the opening of the fruit in the opening of where the hemorrhoids are, and that will also help it. Hanemile pika ilai. This is if you have hemorrhoids in the outer part. Pika tataimai. What if it's more internal? What do you do? Lete tarbet tzvirta de lo iftach. This is a bit weird. Take the fat of a female goat that has not yet given birth. It's weird. Like, what's the difference if she's given birth or not given birth? Okay, I mean, if anything else wasn't weird that we've seen yet so far. Okay, and lifasher, melt the fat. Ve lishadebe, and put it on the wound. Ve'ilo, if this doesn't work, or elo, it could mean if this doesn't work, or if you don't have these substances, you don't have a goat who's never given birth yet. So what do you do? Lete tlat tarfe kra de miyabshe betula. Take 3 pumpkin leaves that have dried in the shade. And again, burn them and take the ashes and spread them on. Ve'ilo, right, on the wounded area. This is again for the internal hemorrhoid. Ve'ilo, lete mishakte chazone, take snail shells. Ve'ilo, maite mishach kira. Ve'linko b'shachke de kitana b'kaita, uda amar gufna b'sitva. If not, take oil, which is shemen zayit, olive oil, kira, which is wax, mix them together, and then put it in a cloth made of kitana in the kaita. Kaita is the summer, so it's made of flax in the summer, or if it's the winter, da'amar, which is da'amar gufna, which is cotton. Put in cotton in the winter, or perhaps wool. Rabbi Yochanan chash be'udei. Now we're going to get into a long thing. That was the hemorrhoids. Now we're getting into a long thing about ear. If you have a pain in your ear, what do you do? Okay, earache. Orele Rabbi Yochanan va'amrile Beit Midrasha. Some people say Rabbi Yochanan told them what to do. Some people say it was in the Beit Midrash. They said, again, all happening in the Beit Midrash, not at doctors. Even though we did see, obviously, people went to doctors also. Right? That was a whole discussion about the idol worshiper doctor and others, but also the rabbis. My Orele, what did they teach him to do? Ki hada amar Abaye, it's the same thing they said as what Abaye said. Amrli aim. Abaye loves to quote his aim. His aim is not his mother, even though aim is translated as mother. His mother died in childbirth. It's actually this woman who took care of him. Lo ibre kolyata ela leudna. The kidney was only meant for, the kidney was created in order to help the ear. Okay, sounds a little strange. Now we're going to see Amarava, Amarli Menyume Asya, Menyume, the Asya, the doctor, the healer, told me, Kulu, okay, here you see, there were people who were just doctors and not only rabbis, but the rabbis are quoting them. Kulu shakyana kashu leudna lebar mimaya de kulyata. All liquids are bad for the ear, other than the liquid that comes from the kidney. Late, so what should you do? Late koyata de badcha karcha. Take the kidney of a bald goat. V'likrai shtiva erev. Cut it horizontally and vertically. V'lenach amalala denura. Put it on dimming coals. V'hanumaya dinafkamine lishdinu be'udne. And the liquid that comes out of that, put it in your ear. Lo karire v'lo chamire ela pashure. Don't put it when it's hot. Don't put it when it's cold. Put it in when the temperature is tepid. V'ilo, if not that, here's another suggestion. Lete tarba de chipushta gamlanita. Take the fat of a large beetle. V'lifasher v'lishadebe. And again, melt it and put it in. V'ilo, if not that, limalye leude mishcha. Fill up the ear with oil. V'liavid shev ptilta das fasta. Take 7 wicks made out of alfalfa. Velete shufta detuma, take the dried ends of a garlic. Veletu barka b'charesha, put a hair at the end of one end of the wicks. Okay, I think the mean is right. I just have to check this one. 1 second. For 7. Right, you tie, yeah, that's what you do. You tie the garlic to one of the ends of the wicks with a hair. That's the same bark that we saw before. Okay, so you tie the garlic to one end of the wicks with the hair, and then the lidle behunura, and then you light it on fire. The idach resha, the other side of the wick, motva beudna, put it in your ear. So you have one on flame, one side burning. You have one side in your ear with all this oil in your ear. The leitev une lahadin and put your ear close to a fire. The yizdar mizika, but you should be aware of drafts because you don't want the fire to blow into your ear. It seems like a little bit, you have to be super careful here. And then you put one in, do that with it. Then you put another one in and you do this. If you remember, you probably don't remember, but we started off by taking 7 wicks and then you do this with all 7 wicks. So you have this, it's a little hard to understand exactly. And it doesn't really say how long you leave it in your ear. That's also a good question. But you basically have this oil in your ear, wick in your ear, fire, this burning garlic ends on the other side, and keep switching all 7 wicks and do the same thing for all 7 wicks. Lishana, you're saying they're dried. I saw it was dried ends of garlic. You say dried garlic leaves. There's different opinions here. Lishana achrine. Elo. Okay, so a different version is that not don't do this, but if the other thing didn't work, now you're going to see it's similar but different. Lete shev ptilta bikra. Take 7 wicks of animal hair. V'shayif le-mishcha farsima, which some people also have a different word here. I think they have asfasta instead of farsima. According to this version, it's take balsam oil. Nete charesha benur b'charesha be'une, and again, put this oil in your ear, or maybe put oil on the wicks actually. Just check. Okay, not that it really matters that we get this exactly straight, but yeah, 7 wicks of, they say wax tapers. Interesting. Okay. They say here in the Koran, 7 wicks of wax tapers, smear them with smear them with the balsam oil or alfalfa oil, depending on your girsa. Put one end, right. So you smear the wicks. Okay, you smear the wicks with the balsam oil, not put in your ear this time. And again, one side you burn up with a fire, the other side you put in your ear. And again, keep doing this for all 7 wicks. And again, beware of drafts. If this doesn't work or you don't have this, try this one. Lete udra denada, take a strong fiber that's dried but not combed. Delo mishkaf, it's not combed. Vinanach ba, and put it inside. Velitne leudne lahadi nura, and put your ear near the fire. Umizdar mizika, but worry about drafts that the fire doesn't go into your ear. Vilo, if not this, lete guvta dekanya atika barmea shnin, take the tube of a reed that's 100 years old. The should be limliye, not limliche, and fill it with milcha galanita, with a rock salt. Velikle vilidabik, and then burn it and then stick it on your ear. Simanech. Now, the way to remember these things, and it's unclear which parts they're referring to, but this is just a general principle and makes a lot of sense, actually, if not everything here made sense. Ritiva liyabashta, viyabashta liritiva. If you have too much liquid, use something dry. If it's too dry, use something liquidy. Okay, and that's how you know, depending on what kind of ailment you have, what type of objects, and things you need to use. Amar Rabba Barzutra Amar Rabbi Chanina. Ma'alim oznayim b'Shabbat. You can reset the ears on Shabbat. What they really mean here is if your jaw gets out of place, you can reset it on Shabbat. Tani Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda biyad avalo b'sam. Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda says you could do it by hand, but not with drugs. Ikad amre b'sam avalo biyad. Some people say no with drugs, but not with your hand. Why? In my time, mazrif zarif. Because if you use your hands, you could actually wound yourself, and wounding is one of the melachot on Shabbat. Amar Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia Amar Rav, ayin shemarda mutar lekachla b'Shabbat. If your eye comes out of its socket, right? We talked about the jaw coming out. Now we're talking about the eye coming out of its place. You're allowed to put a salve on it on Shabbat. Savramine, they thought he meant hanemilihu deshchike samani me'atmo. This is as long as you prepared the salve the day before, because you can't grind things, and that's how they would make these salves. So they thought that was the case. Aval mishchak b'Shabbat, but to grind it on Shabbat, or atuye derech reshut harabim, but if you would take it through the public domain, which is a isur melacha d'oraita, lo. Of course, you can't do that. That's what they thought. But Amarlu Ahume Rabbana Rabbi Yaakov Shmei, but a rabbi came and his name was Rabbi Yaakov, and he said, Ledidi mefarsha minei Rav Yehuda. I heard that Rav Yehuda said, Afilu mishchak b'Shabbat v'atuye derech reshut harabim mutal. I heard Rav Yehuda say that even doing this, even going against malacha d'oraita, okay, because really the problem with medicine is that you might come to grind this stuff on Shabbat. So even if it's prepared already, you can't use it on Shabbat, because if you run out, let's say, you might come to grind it. But if it's already ground, you can see it's already working. We can be more lenient. So the assumption here is if your eye comes out of its socket, we assume if it's already prepared, then you only have to do something that's forbidden on rabbinic level. You can, but not if it's doraita. But Rav Yehuda said no, even doraita. Okay, having your eye come out of its place is very dangerous. Rav Yehuda shari lemichal ani b'Shabbat. So he permitted this whole thing on Shabbat, right? Putting the salve in your eye on Shabbat. Amar lehu Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, but Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda came along and said, Man Tzayit Yehuda Machil Shabbat. So this very crazy line against Rav Yehuda. It was a big gadol. He said, who's going to listen to Yehuda? He doesn't even call him Rav Yehuda. Who's Machil Shabbat? That means he's Mechalel Shabbat. He's having people desecrate Shabbat by telling them they could do this. Well, okay, sometimes you got to be careful what you say. L'sov chash be'enei. Well, in the end, Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda had this problem with his eye. Shalachle, so he said to Rav Yehuda, Shario Aser, is it permitted or forbidden for me? Can I put this salve on after he said that totally disrespectful statement? So what do you think Rav Yehuda said? Shalach le lekol amashare ledidach asir. Everyone else is permitted to, but you, no, you can't do it because you mocked me about this halacha. And Rav Yehuda continues, and he says, you weren't just making fun of me. You think it was me who said it? I didn't say this. Demar Shmuel, I was referring to what Shmuel, my rabbi, permitted. Okay, you were going against a really important gadol when you said this. Remember, Shmuel, by the way, was a scientist and he was a doctor, right? He was very involved in all this stuff. And here's the story. There was a maid servant who was in the house of Shmuel. She had an infected eye on Shabbat. She screamed and screamed in pain, and nobody listened to her. Like, it's Shabbat, it's Shabbat, it's Shabbat. Sorry, we can't help you. And what happened? You can imagine what happened. Paka'ina, her eye came out of its place. Okay, she lost her eye, basically. The next day, Shmuel went out and started teaching. If you have a problem with your eye, it's moving out of its socket or something like that. It's unclear exactly what they're referring to, but you're allowed to be mechalel Shabbat, whatever this woman had, because now he realized that it was very serious. He didn't realize the day before, unfortunately for this woman. My taima deshuliana deena beuvatna delibatalu. Because the ability to see from your eyes is dependent on the valves of the heart, and therefore this is serious. Kigon mai. So now they say, well, what are the signs of this disease? Because it's really important to know. Can we move Chalal Shabbat or not, right? Everyone has all sorts of things in their eye, right? Well, how do we know? Amar Rav Yehuda, Kigon Rira, there's a discharge, Ditza, pricking, Dama, blood, Dimata, tearing, Kidcha, inflammation, Utchilat Uchla, the onset of infection. Lafuke, but what is not a sign, right? This sounds like almost anything. Well, sof uchla, if you see it's the end of the infection, upatzuche ene delo, or to do something to improve your eyesight, to put a salve on, I don't know such thing, but it could improve your eyesight, that you can't do. Amar Rav Yehuda, zibura, udecharze silva, besimta, udekaiv ene, okay, let's go through these things, a hornet sting, or the prick of a thorn, or an abscess, udekaiv ene, or you have an eye pain, va'atu ilave ishta, and you get a fever. Kulu be bane sakanta. If you go to the bathhouse, it's dangerous. Okay, now we're not getting just what should you do, what shouldn't you do. If you go to the bathhouse when you have these things, it could be very dangerous. There's always those warning signs. If you go to like a hot tub or something, if you have certain diseases, don't go in. Okay, chama lechama, it's kind of play on words. Chama is also known as a radish. For chama, for a fever, which is heat. Okay, so a radish for a fever, or silka litzina, beets for chills. That's what you should use. But chilufa sakanta. But if you do the reverse, it's actually dangerous. Chamimi la'akraba, bekariri lizibura, hot foods or hot, what are we talking about? Hot. Yeah, like if you put heat on the, right, like a hot compress for a scorpion bite, or cold compresses for a hornet, the chilufa sakanta. But if you do the reverse, it's dangerous. Last one for today. Chamime lesilva, heat for a thorn. Vikarire lechaspanita, for a facial wound. Cold for a facial wound is right. The chilufe sakanta. But the opposite, but the reverse is actually dangerous. Okay, let's do a quick review of our daf. So we started with these two approaches about the idol worshiper. Rav Yehuda, who said they can't do anything for a Jew. Then we had Rabbi Yochanan, who said they could, depending on, number one, right? We had a whole bunch of, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, by the way, we said, if you pay them, if you have a mumcha, again, I'm reviewing even from yesterday. Then we had Rabbi Yochanan, who said, if you're going to die anyway, well, then yes, you can have them heal you because they can't do much worse than that. And then he came with the two statements today. But if it's in between, where it could be life-threatening, but you're not yet going to die necessarily, so it's something that is a cholesh sheyesh bo sakana, as they say, there's danger. You could be mechalel Shabbat for that. Well, you can't have the idol worshiper do anything because there's danger. They might kill you. And according to the second version, it's internal things they can't help. External, they can. Some people, by the way, say external things, people can see what they're doing to you, whereas internal, they can't really see as well, and therefore there's more of a chance. But I think it's more a level of severity. Okay, then we have the nafkamina between them. Then we went to what's inside. We said, and then we went to like what things you could be mechalel Shabbat for. And then we talked about either omed, if you need to assess already the person, will they live or die, and internal things you're allowed to be mechalel Shabbat. And then we said what's considered internal from the lips in. What about the teeth? We had a whole debate about the teeth. We didn't really get an answer. We had two stories. One of them, two sources. One of them was the story of Rabbi Yochanan, very interesting story. And then we had to raise the question: well, how did he go to an idol worshiper if it was something he could be mechalel Shabbat about? That goes against what Rabbi Yochanan himself said. Then we had to come up with a reason, and then we compared it to Rabbi Yehuda's story to try to figure out what the distinction is. And then we said, oh, mean, right? Again, distinction, mean and idol worship. Okay, and in the end, we said it's because she was a rope mumche and had a reputation on the line. But that doesn't help us with the heretic. From there, we got into this long list, which I'm not going to review, what you do for all sorts of ailments, whether it's, I'll review a little bit what it was, a wound from a sword, boils, fever, hemorrhoids, ear ache, eye coming out of the socket, jaw coming out of its place, and things like that. What you're allowed to do, and what, number one, what you can be mechalel Shabbat for, and also, more importantly for them, was how do you deal with it? What are the types of things that you can do to resolve these issues? And with that, we finish for today. And like I said, do not try these in your own home. Wishing everyone a good day. And Shishma b'sachot tovot.